Okay. Check. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the War Room. This one is for the new main event for the weekend. RDA. Obviously, we posted up the RDA Makachev video, and then about 10 minutes later, Makachev was removed from the fight. So that's unfortunate. We hope him a speedy recovery, and look forward to getting him back in there. But big respect to Paul Felder. I mean, 5 days' notice, down at 155, insisted on 5 rounds. That is something I do want to get into briefly. First of all, when we were out in Fight Island, I think what I worked 2 events with Felder. We were there for about 2.5 weeks together. He was on a bike or in a swimming pool or running the whole time. He's gotten really into triathlon, so I think that him taking this on short notice at 155, it is a sign, obviously, of how tough and courageous he is to take this opportunity, but it's also a sign of how confident he is that he's in shape. It could have quite easily been a case of him going, you know what, let's do a catch weight, let's do 3 rounds. I'll fight you at 160 over 3 rounds or something like that. Could have quite easily made it easier on himself, taking the fight on short notice. The fact that he's said, 155 is good, tells me 2 things. One is that he feels like he can make that weight comfortably. And 2 is that he's interested in being at 155. He's interested in being a top player at 155. I know he's been waiting for the right fight. We've discussed it a few times. He's not interested in fighting anybody that doesn't interest him, and I totally get that. I understand, especially at 155 for him, because it is a big cut. It's a hard cut. But I understood since he's been doing all this triathlon training, his weight's actually down. So I think this might be an easier cut for him than anything, especially with him taking it on short notice. Just tells me that his walking around weight he must be less than 175. Must be. And I've trained with him in the past when we've been on the road, and he's been 5-10 pounds heavier than me. He's a big dude. I didn't think he'd go back down to 155, to be honest, but this triathlon training that he's been doing is got his weight down and got him in shape. He looked great. He looks really good. I also think it's a good power play because this is obviously RDA's return to 155. And as you saw on the previous breakdown before Makachev pulled out, I didn't think that fight was going to happen in Fight Island because RDA cut into 155 in the current climate. I expected him to get sick or injured or something, but COVID was the obvious choice, and I'm pretty sure that's what it was. So this is a really strong move by Paul Felder to say, you know what, no, 155 is fine, 5 rounds is fine, because that's then going to push RDA both mentally and physically. Mentally going into the fight, knowing that Felder fancies himself over 5 rounds. And physically, if it does get that distance, because we know what Felder's like over 5 rounds. He's tough as nails. Okay, let's get into a bit of technical stuff. Right. So, as we know, RDA, well, first of all, both of these guys, there are some statements that you can make about both fighters that ring true. They've both got excellent Muay Thai. They're both tough as nails. They're both very well conditioned. The differences come when you start looking at their grappling skills, their ground game. RDA is much more adamant sometimes on getting fights to the floor and controlling them from the top position, whereas Felder has no real interest in that at all. I mean, there have been times when he's finished fights on the floor, but that's because he's got into a submission tussle with somebody, or because he's been tested on the ground and fancies his chances, and then when the opportunity comes, he takes top position and gets a good finish. His elbow striking on the floor is just as good as it is on the feet, and that's something that you've got to think is going to be valuable going in there against RDA, who, he's getting on a bit in years. What is there a difference? Oh, they're the same age. Oh, RDA is in fact younger, but the difference of their record. See, sometimes we talk about fighters' ages, and it's not necessarily about the year they were born. I mean, RDA's 6 months younger than Paul Felder, actually, but the difference in records, Felder's 17-5, and RDA is 29-13. That's a lot more fights. It's a lot more miles on the clock, a lot more punches on the face, a lot more scar tissue around the eyes. If I'm Paul Felder, and Felder's got a fair amount of scar tissue as it is, he does get cut up as well, but I feel like the elbows of Paul Felder standing and on the ground could make this messy. I think if this fight does go to the ground, it will be RDA that's trying to push it there. Felder's got good takedown defense, 62% takedown defense to 39% accuracy for RDA. Felder he's not really too interested in takedowns himself. He really wants this fight to be on the feet. He wants this to be a Muay Thai contest. And I think RDA is the kind of guy that he can coax into a kickboxing fight. I think if it starts to go south for RDA after the first couple of rounds, then we might start seeing him grapple. But I think he's also going to recognise how big and strong Paul Felder is. And again, this is where the power play comes in at taking it on a few days' notice and agreeing to 5 rounds. That's just a statement from Felder to tell RDA that he's in shape and he's ready to go. So that this. I just think it's fascinating the way that Felder's approached this. We all know that he's a bit of a maniac and he's incredibly tough and he'll fight anybody. But this is a big roll of the dice for him, especially given the fact that he didn't, he seemed kind of halfway out the door after his last fight against Hooker. That was a real disappointing one for him, and to be sitting octagon side for that and to see those kicks landing and to feel those kicks landing and to see how much punishment both of those guys took. A part of me did think to myself, we won't see Felder back in here, at least not at 155. I remember seeing him before the Barbosa fight, the second Barbosa fight at 242. He looked rough, mainly because he was cutting to 155 and there was just no meat on the bone. He was shredded, but he looks so much better now. I just think this conditioning training, this cycling and swimming and running that he's been doing, as it stripped some muscle off his frame, and that was really the issue. It wasn't that he was lazy at all. I mean, he was one of the leanest fighters going into the octagon. Him and Barbosa were absolutely shredded. It was a muscle mass problem. He's got thick legs, thick calves. So I wonder whether some of that muscle mass has been leaned down a little bit, and that's going to help him make the weight. But again, I keep circling back to it. 5 rounds, it's a power play by Felder, coming in saying he's in shape and he's ready to go at 155. So as far as the fight goes standing, like I said, we've got 2 Muay Thai fighters, RDA being southpaw, Felder being orthodox. Felder seems to prefer fighters that are also orthodox, just seems to be my experience watching his fights, mainly because that lead calf is open and he chops into that lead leg. But given the fact that RDA is southpaw, it does leave the inside lead leg open to him for the rear kick. It also leaves the body and the head kick open, and he's got a thunderous body kick as well, as does RDA. So I think we might see these guys kind of stand in range and we might get a bit of blood sport going on, a bit of, you kick me and I'll kick you. We'll go back and forth and see who's toughest. Neither of these guys are going to be able to walk the next day. There's going to be a lot of low kicks thrown in this one. Both guys will be chopping into each other's leg. It's who follows up the low kicks or who's debilitated by them first. RDA's got much more of a boxing-orientated Muay Thai game, whereas although Felder's got excellent boxing as it is, there's more of a sprinkling of kicks and knees and spinning attacks. Now spinning attacks, they're a little more difficult when you're fighting someone of an opposite stance, especially if I'm standing orthodox and I'm facing someone that's southpaw. Their lead hand is mirroring mine, so their rear hand is the furthest one away, as you can see. So this is why this body kick works, because it comes straight into the midsection. I would have to block their kick on my rear arm. So you can imagine how vulnerable that midsection is. But if you think I'm spinning, and if I'm spinning, I'm not going this way, I'm going this way. I'm going to throw my lead shoulder across the front side. So I'm spinning this direction, which means I'm kicking with my right leg if I'm orthodox. The problem with that is that you have to be very accurate to get it under the lead elbow of a southpaw fighter, or you have to get them circling towards it, which Felder's definitely got the skill to do. He's got a taekwondo background, and you can imagine he's drilled that kick a lot. But you have to control the person with your footwork to force them in that direction. Otherwise, you're going to kick them and they're circling that way, and you're going to end up kicking the fence and giving you back. That's the danger with spinning attacks, and that's one of the reasons why we kind of lost them in MMA for a short while, was because there were a lot of vulnerabilities to spinning attacks. The other thing, obviously, that Felder's known for is spinning elbows, spinning back fists. And he's going to throw more spinning elbows now after he fractured his forearm on the back fist. But his elbows are very good, very useful. And they're worth a roll of the dice in this one for a few reasons. Again, if we go back to Southpaw v Orthodox, if I'm spinning, I'm throwing this elbow and I'm hitting with the back of this elbow, so I'm coming around in this direction, going over my right shoulder. So if I'm facing someone that's the same stance as me, if I'm facing someone that can meet their hands with mine in an orthodox stance, if I'm throwing a spinning elbow here, the risk is that I'm turning my back on someone that could just step forward and pass the impact of the shot and be able to clamp onto my back. If I'm facing someone that is in a southpaw stance, as I throw my spinning attack, even if they step forward, the worst case scenario is that we're going to be back to back. So there's a moment where you can disengage there, where you're not quite as vulnerable when you're throwing that. The challenge is coming over the lead shoulder. This is what, because this would be the spinning attack direction of a southpaw fighter to me. They'd be spinning that way and coming over my lead shoulder. Now Felder has got a good left hook, which he can use to kind of drag RDA onto his body kick, onto his right hand. It's going to be the right hand that's going to pay dividends for him in this one, because Southpaw v Orthodox, it's the safest thing to do. Be wary of the lead hand of RDA, get to the outside of it, throw the right hand down the pipe, follow up with kicks, inside low kick, outside low kick, lots of different options for him. There is going to be some takedowns defended in this one, I feel, but I do think it's going to be RDA that's going to try and push Felder. But the strength and the durability of Felder, the hustle that he's got, I think it's going to make it a very arduous effort to get him to the floor. And even if RDA is able to get him down for the first round, there's going to be a lot of scrambling in the successive rounds that we might see Felder coming on strong. The question around submissions is one obviously you've got to consider with RDA, because he has got good skills on the ground, but at the same time, the thing that always stands out to me is how people deal with Charles Oliveira. His ground game is pretty incredible, and Felder did a good job of staying out of danger in that fight. And he was tied up, he was tangled up. There are a lot of people that don't get free of Charles Oliveira when put in those positions. And we saw in that fight, we saw in the Stevie Ray fight, that he can rain down shots, he can rain down elbows and do so much damage. And the striking mentality, what you're capable of on the feet, does transfer to an extent on the floor as well. Your understanding of how to move guards and set shots up, that there is some overflow there. So if Felder finds himself in top position, if RDA starts to slow down, if the weight cuts got to him or even to Felder, then we're going to start seeing one person wearing on the other, and the ground game might be the point of difference, especially on RDA's side. But honestly, I expect this to be a kickboxing extravaganza. I think it's going to be both of these guys are going to want to stand and take chunks out of each other. There's a lot of respect coming from RDA's side, the fact that Felder's stepped up on short notice and has taken the fight. But at the same time, it's RDA going back down to 155, and the reason he left 155 was, he picked up a couple of losses, but it was Alvarez and Tony Ferguson. He's only losing to guys by decision, as we discussed in the previous show. 5 rounds against Tony Ferguson, 5 against Colby, 5 against Usman, 5 against Leon Edwards, and 3 against Chiesa. They're his last 5 losses. And then you drop his wins in there. He's got an arm triangle over Kevin Lee at 170. A 5-round decision win over Robbie Lawler. That arm triangle over Neil Magny. And then another 3-round unanimous decision at welterweight when he made his debut against Tarek Safadine. RDA is durable over the distance, no matter who he's against, whether it's world-class caliber at one weight class or the next. I think Felder coming in knowing this and being an analyst, and you've got to bear in mind as well, Felder had been researching this event to work it, which means that he was looking at RDA very objectively from Makhachev's perspective, which should probably give him a clear view of where the actual strengths and weaknesses are of RDA. You know, to be able to research a fighter that you're not facing and then all of a sudden find yourself in that fight, I can't help but think it would give him a far more realistic perspective of what he's up against without the ego coming into play. You know, over a training camp, if you're training for 8-10 weeks for a particular person, the process of that training camp is kind of partly to build you up, but also there's a process in your head as well, which happens to a lot of fighters I've spoken to. Whereas in the process of building yourself up, you also kind of subconsciously tear them down. So you'll watch a fight and you'll go, he's not going to hit me with that, or that he doesn't look strong in that position. Or, you know, you kind of discount and discredit what they do. There's no danger from either of these guys in this fight coming in, because RDA knows what Felder's made of, especially given the fact that he's taking this on short notice. And Felder's done his research on RDA, so he knows what he was up against and how he was going to match up against Makhachev. Felder stepping in at short notice, it just tells me where he's at mentally. He must be in a very strong place. He must be very close to weight and ready to go. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this now because someone's at the door. Thanks for joining me. Enjoy the fights. See you next time.